Hello, Attorney General. Thank you for meeting with us to observe Labor Day. I understand you
Thank
have a
you.
report that just came out.
Yes, very excited about our annual Labor Day report. It's the ninth annual report and highlights just the incredible work that the Fair Labor Division in the office does on behalf of our constituents.
Great. Well, I'd like to start with the Uber Lyft settlement. Could you summarize for our listeners what the case was all about?
Thank you. It's an important decision, and we've been reminding folks while we have hundreds of thousands, we think hundreds of thousands of Uber and Lyft drivers in the Commonwealth. It's not just about, of course, protecting those workers, it's also about protecting consumers. And that's our responsibility, right? As an office, my role as AG is to protect our consumers and protect our workers. And so, in this historic settlement, and it is historic because it is really the first of its kind in the country, we were able to work with Uber and Lyft. And I say work, the beginning, it of course started out in court and was a battle in many ways, but got them to understand, I think, a couple of things. One is that you can run a great and successful business while at the same time protecting your workers and providing them with basic wages and benefits and economic dignity. And so this settlement does a few things. One, it provides a minimum pay standard for drivers, which has already gone into effect, of $32.50. Very soon, Uber and Lyft will pay the state $175 million. And most of those resources will go back to those drivers who were misclassified. And that was the underlying question, whether they were employees or independent contractors. And this is a way to get at some restitution for what we still believe is a misclassification case. But we were also able to work with Uber and Lyft in making sure they had access to healthcare. A stipend will be made available. They will also have access to paid leave and other benefits that I think most employees take for granted. And it's just the minimum, it's just the floor. So I'm equally excited about supporting the Yes on 3 ballot initiative that will also, if successful, create an opportunity for those drivers to unionize and push for greater benefits.
That's exactly what that I was going to ask you about is your position on the ballot question with unionization. So thank you very much for letting us know ahead of time. I do want to ask about misclassification and with this settlement, looking forward into the future, how do you see that it could impact misclassification?
It's still an outstanding question. That's one thing that we were not resolving with this, but it's still an issue. And we are looking at misclassifications issues and cases, not just in the context, of course, of Uber and Lyft drivers, but the gig economy as a whole in various industries. In the future, it may be an opportunity for us not only to continue to push on the question, but to also work with our partners at the State House, our union stakeholders as well, who care about this issue deeply. So it's an outstanding question that we still want to address and deal with. But what was most important as we navigated what could have been a years-long case and process and drawn-out appeals was that the drivers get something now, and that they get the wages they deserve, that they get the dignity they deserve. And I'll even add one point. At some point before this settlement, you could have been removed from the platform and had no recourse to go back to the company to challenge or appeal that. This settlement changes that. And I'm confident that if we get this ballot question across the finish line and folks vote yes on 3, it's an opportunity for us to really push the envelope on what's possible for these drivers to receive in terms of additional benefits, while also using it as a model of how we work with businesses, and I'll say powerful companies, to get workers what they deserve while not undermining the success of a company.
Great. That is so helpful. Misclassification is just such a key issue for the labor movement. So
That's right.
for addressing that. So what additional tools does your office need to enforce wage loss?
I would say, as evidence in our recent report, which was the ninth annual Labor Day report the team put out, it really stressed a few things. And I'll cite some numbers because I just feel blessed not only to have this job, but to work with an incredible team every single day, not just on the Uber and Lyft matter, but of course on wage theft enforcement and other law enforcement when it comes to wage issues, benefit issues. And so in this report, we highlight just in 1 year alone, so fiscal year 24, the team was able to help over 40,000 workers across the Commonwealth. And that's in 1 year. They issued enforcement actions against over 630 employers to push to hold them accountable for a whole range of issues, including wage theft and other violations, and secured over $30 million. Let me make sure I have my number right, actually, because it is that powerful. Yeah, over $30 million. I'm like, yes, over $30 million in 1 year in penalties, but also restitution for workers, which is incredible. And that's just a snapshot of some of the enforcement. So we have a lot of tools actually available to us, and probably some of the most progressive tools in the country. And what we're actually looking to do is to expand who we're targeting. So not just looking at, for example, the economic labor issues of adults, but also our children. It is a priority of mine, not just as an AG, but a mom of 2 young boys. This is their map behind me, but to make sure that child labor laws are also enforced. So we're working with school administrators and school districts on that, and educating young people. We're starting a youth advisory council to make sure young people are informing that work. So there's a lot of tools available to us, and where they fall short, which is, I think, in just small areas, we show up at the State House to push, and that may include, for example, this misclassification issue in the context of the gig economy, or other tools related to wage theft in expanding penalties or something like that.
Yeah, I did want to address child labor. I know there's issues all over the state, but in Southeastern Mass, I just wanted to mention we have a Dunkin' Donuts case in Dartmouth, and if there was anything else you'd like to mention as a connection to Southeastern Mass.
That's right. I would say whether it's Dunkin' Donuts, and I often use that example because I think it's a place folks just frequently go to get their coffee, right? And you think Dunkin' Donuts, you think Ben Affleck and just all of the branding around Dunkin' Donuts. But I think it's also an opportunity for us to recognize that some employers need greater education on child labor law enforcement and what those laws are and responsibilities are. And we are working with employers all the time. It's not just from an enforcement lens, it's also from a training lens. We do trainings all the time, and just re-upped our trainings coming out of the New Bedford regional office that we have. We want that office to be a resource to folks in the South Coast community. And we do it in partnership with stakeholders on the ground. And then in terms of enforcement, you look at a Dunkin' Donuts, and we're saying if it can happen at Dunkin' Donuts, it can happen anywhere. So the training will be critical, and where we find employers that are unwilling to cooperate or to change their practices or policies, then we use our enforcement tool. But it's not the place we start. And I think this is why the Fair Labor Division is just so incredible at what they do. They do their work in several different languages. They make it accessible to employers as well as constituents and workers, looking to always work in collaboration, but knowing when to use the tools that are necessary to bring about enforcement. And so we'll continue to be flexible, but want folks to know a priority will absolutely be protecting our young workers as well.
Great. So in Southeastern Mass, as across the state, we have large numbers of immigrant workers that are often cheated out of their wages. So I wanted to ask you about deferred action as a way to encourage these workers to come forward.
It's a great question, and it really speaks to the breadth and scope of the office. You know, on the one hand, we're doing that enforcement work, which is using our litigation tools, but we also have several other tools, and one is our grant making tools. I will just stress putting out grants in the community around know your rights, or giving organizations on the ground who do mediation or other types of programming the resources they would need to reach this population, so they know what their rights are when it comes to wage and theft laws here or other protections. Another tool that we have is our policy and government tool, we tend to say, which is to show up at the federal level or the state level to push for protections. And here we wanted to expand the years in which folks were eligible for this deferred action based on their collaboration with us and with law enforcement. These are powerful tools, just like the U visa and other types of visas that are available for folks who come forward to work in collaboration with law enforcement to help reduce crime in our communities, or to make sure that our employers and other folks are following our laws. They are critical to this public safety and public health work that we do every day, and this economic work. I'm so proud of the team and the collaboration with the federal government, as well as with other states and other AG offices and union stakeholders to change the rules here.
Great. Yeah, I know that in New Bedford, we have over 500 workers that have been impacted by the new 2 to 4 years for deferred action, and it makes such a difference. And
That's
so
right.
glad that you were able to advocate to change that.
And I think it just speaks to, Kim, our goal is not always to be reactive. And I think people can get frustrated with government because it tends to be reactive. You wait for a complaint and then you show up and do the work. These speak to ways in which we can be proactive in the work. So we can show up at the federal level as well as the state level to push for policy changes that protect our people, that protect immigrants, for example, especially as we see an uptick in migrants coming to the Commonwealth. And we want to be welcoming to those folks who are coming here while reminding them what their rights and protections are and expanding them where we can. So the office is really thinking proactively about how to do this in different spaces and how to use the platform that we have to really have the greatest impact.
Great. Well, I wanted to let you know that the UMass Dartmouth Labor Ed Center is part of a 4-campus program in the UMass system. And, core to our work is education, and I'm wondering how we can support as the labor centers, the labor programs, if there's any way that comes to mind that we might be able to support your work.
I appreciate that question. One is the trainings and various things we do are done well if outside of, say, our building, particularly outside of just Boston. I have to often remind folks that we have an office in New Bedford as well as Springfield and Worcester, and been really intentional about hiring into those regional offices and lifting them up because they're equally important as our Boston office. And so where we can do trainings in community in partnership with you and others, we would love to do that. We also have a labor advisory council that we have revamped in many ways and expanded to include more voices and more stakeholders, and we are actively working and getting that off the ground. So we can, of course, follow up and send more details there. And then we encourage folks to follow us on social media or on our website. In social media, it's at Mass AGO, and I think everyone these days tends to be on social media. But we put these reports out. So our recent Labor Day report we put out, we want people to be able to share that. Our strategic plan that we put out earlier in the year to articulate to the community how we plan on using their taxpayer dollars to do the work on their behalf. We put that strategic plan out. It focuses on labor issues and wage theft enforcement and so many other issues. We even translated it into different languages. We need folks' help to spread the word and to get this information out there as best they can, all of which is extremely helpful.
I deeply appreciate the community outreach work that you do. And I just wanted to mention that in New Bedford, it's on Purchase Street, the location of the regional office.
That's right.
If you would like to just do a search to get more information, I want everybody to know that that's available right here in our area. So I wanted to ask if there's anything that you would like to add that we've missed.
I will say I absolutely love my job. It is a blessing to serve as the people's attorney, but frankly, as your AG. And I do this work with an incredible team of lawyers and staff, where we're close to 700 people across all of these offices, across 4 offices. And of course, we fund organizations that are community-based to expand that footprint. But I've been also stressing, while we can make sure folks have access to the wages they work so hard for, that they are protected publicly from public safety issues and from crime, and we can make sure our kids and their well-being is also equally protected. We also are taking on hate because we recognize an uptick in hate in various communities and prioritizing that, because if you can't just be who you want to be in the community you choose to live, none of the other tangible things really matter, right? So I want to stress that because I think it's important. And as we look at politics and the divisiveness of politics in this moment in time, to remind folks that it's important to also vote. Election, there's an election just this week, many primary election this week, there's an election in November. So reminding folks to exercise their voice and that there's power in that civic engagement. So engage with our office, get out there, engage in your community, and you really can make a difference. We've seen it working hand in hand with stakeholders like yourself and so many others to accomplish great things. So I remind folks that we will continue to protect their well-being, and take on hate and white supremacy and all the things that we see rearing their ugly head in Massachusetts. And on top of that, we want folks to get civically engaged because it's very important, particularly in this moment in time.
Great, could not agree more. I really appreciate that you've given us this time on South Coast Working, and
Thank
I
you.
hope to continue the conversation and support your work. Thank you very much.
Absolutely. Thank you. And thank you for all that you and your team do every single day. Really appreciate it.